So here's a question for you. How do you project power across oceans? How do you dominate a region without even setting foot on land? If you're the use, you already know the answer: aircraft carriers.
They're floating fortresses, self-sustaining war machines that can launch airstrikes, deploy troops, and control entire theaters of war. But what if China is catching up? What if they've built something that can challenge American naval dominance?
Well, guess what? They have Meet the Fusion, China's latest, most advanced, and most dangerous aircraft carrier. And no, this isn't just another ship, it's a statement.
A bold, undeniable declaration that China isn't content with playing second fiddle anymore. They want control of the Pacific, and they're building the tools to take it. This isn't speculation. This is happening. When I first heard about Fujian, I thought, okay, another Chinese carrier. They've got a couple already. How different can this one really be? But then I looked at the specs.
And let me tell you, this thing is massive. At just under 37 feet long and 250 feet wide with a displacement up to 85,000 tons, it's the largest warship China has ever built. It's not quite as big as the U.S. Navy's Gerald R. Ford
Ford-class carriers, but it's close. And in naval warfare, size matters. Bigger carriers mean more planes, more fuel, more munitions, and longer sustained combat operations. Fujian isn't just another ship, it's China's first real step toward building a true blue water navy capable of challenging the U.S.
But size alone doesn't win wars. It's the technology that really matters. And here's where things get interesting. Fujian is the first Chinese carrier to use electromagnetic aircraft launch systems, EMLS.
The same cutting-edge tech that only one other ship in the world has, America's USS Gerald R. Ford. This is a massive leap forward for China's Navy. Their previous carriers used outdated Soviet-style ski jump ramps, which limited the types of aircraft they could launch. EMLS changes the game completely. It allows for faster launch cycles, less wear and tear on aircraft, and the ability to launch heavier planes like early warning aircraft and refueling tankers. This isn't just an upgrade, it's a total transformation of Chinese carrier aviation. And let's be real, China didn't develop this tech in isolation. They've been watching, studying, and let's just say borrowing ideas from the best.
So now I'm thinking, all right, they've got the launch tech, but how are they powering this thing? That's where Fusion gets even more interesting. Unlike U.S. supercarriers, which run on nuclear reactors, Fusion still relies on conventional fuel.
That might sound like a weakness, and in some ways, nuclear-powered carriers can stay at sea indefinitely, while fuel-powered ships need to refuel regularly, making them more vulnerable in a prolonged conflict. But China has found a workaround. Instead of relying on traditional propulsion, Fujian uses an integrated electric system, meaning its 8 boilers and 4 steam turbines don't just drive the ship forward, they also generate massive amounts of electricity, which is crucial for running its high-tech systems like EMLS. This is a huge step forward in naval engineering. It makes the ship quieter, more efficient, and more adaptable to future upgrades. The real question is, can China build a nuclear-powered supercarrier next? Because if they do, that's when things get really serious.
But let's talk about what actually makes an aircraft carrier dangerous. It's air wing. If you're sending a carrier into battle, you need planes. So how many aircraft can Fujian carry?
Estimates say around 60, which is a big jump from China's older carriers. That means squadrons of J-15 fighters, the backbone of Chinese naval aviation. The J-15 is basically a Chinese version of the Russian Su-33 flanker, heavily modified for carrier operations. It's fast, powerful, and heavily armed with anti-air and anti-ship missiles. But here's the thing, J-15S aren't stealthy, and in modern warfare, that's a problem. That's why China has been developing the J-35, their answer to the American F-35C. It's a stealth fighter designed specifically for carrier use, and once it's fully operational, Fujian's power projection will increase dramatically. And then there are the helicopters. Fujian isn't just carrying fighters. It's got Ka-52 Alligator attack helicopters for striking enemy ships, and Z-20 helicopters, which are basically China's version of the Black Hawk, for transport and utility missions. Put all this together, and you've got a serious carrier air wing, not quite as large or advanced as the U.S. Navy's, but getting closer every year.
Now, here's the big question: how would Fusion stack up against an American carrier in a fight? Let's imagine a one-on-one battle. No submarines, no escort ships, just Fusion versus us Gerald R. Ford.
Right away, the U.S. carrier has the advantage. It carries more planes, about 15 more than Fujian, which means more firepower, more surveillance, and more control of the airspace. The Ford's aircraft, especially the F-35C, are also more advanced, with better sensors, better stealth, and more powerful weapons. But the biggest difference, endurance. The Ford runs on nuclear power, meaning it can stay at sea indefinitely. Fujian, on the other hand, needs fuel, and China's capacity for at-sea refueling is limited. That means in a prolonged battle, the Ford could outlast Fujian, maneuvering freely while the Chinese carrier constantly has to worry about fuel levels. And let's not forget experienced U.S. carrier crews have decades of real combat operations under their belts. China, they're still learning. They've never fought a real war with carriers before.
Still, here's the thing. Fusion isn't meant to fight one-on-one. That's not how China operates. Their strategy is overwhelming force. If Fusion goes into battle, it won't be alone.
It will be backed by destroyers, submarines, missile ships, and land-based aircraft. And in a Taiwan conflict, China wouldn't need to sink U.S. carriers, just keep them far enough away that they can't interfere. That's where China's massive arsenal of ballistic missiles and anti-ship weapons comes in. If they can make the Pacific too dangerous for U.S. carriers, they don't even need to engage in a direct fight. So what does all this mean for the future? Well, one thing is clear China is serious about carrier warfare. Fujian is just the beginning. The real game changer will be their next step, a nuclear-powered supercarrier capable of global operations. Once that happens, China won't just be a regional power. There'll be a global naval force capable of projecting power across entire oceans. And that's when things get really interesting. The world is changing fast. Technology, geopolitics, military power, it's all shifting. And if you think the U.S. will always dominate the seas just because it has in the past, well, history doesn't work like that. Empires rise and empires fall. The only question is who's next.
So here's the big question. What happens next? Because if you think Fusion is the end of the story, you haven't been paying attention. This isn't just about a single ship. This is about what comes after it.
China is building a navy that can go toe-to-toe with the U.S. And let's be real, they're not stopping here. Fujian is just a stepping stone to something bigger, something even more powerful. The real question isn't whether China can challenge the U.S. in the Pacific. That's already happening. The real question is whether they're preparing to replace the U.S. as the dominant naval power. Think about it. For decades, the U.S. Navy has been untouchable. It had the most advanced carriers, the best trained pilots, the biggest fleet, and the strongest alliances. And now China's closing the gap. Fujian is proof of that. But it's not just about building big ships, it's about using them. Right now, the Chinese military doesn't have the experience, the battle-tested strategies, or the operational history to match the U.S., but that can change. All it takes is time. And the one thing China has more than anyone else is patience.
So let's play this out. China builds its next carrier, probably nuclear-powered, probably even bigger than Fusion. They expand their fleet, they ramp up training, they perfect carrier warfare. And then
they have something that isn't just a challenge to the U.S. Navy. They have a true global power projection force, a fleet that can operate anywhere in the world. And that's when the balance of power really shifts. But here's where things get even more complicated, because this isn't just about ships. It's about technology. It's about AI-driven warfare, autonomous drones, and hypersonic missiles. If you think the future of naval combat is just about who has more aircraft carriers, you're thinking like it's still 1945. The real power struggle is happening behind the scenes in research labs and cyber warfare centers in the development of next generation weapons. The battle for the Pacific might not be fought with fighter jets and missiles. It might be fought with AI-controlled fleets, electronic warfare, and space-based surveillance. The country that masters automation, intelligence, and adaptability will be the country that dominates the oceans.